everybody. Now we are ready to kick things off. So I want to hand this over to the MC of the day, who is also the Chamber's chair of the board for this year, Ms. Val Giovignoni. And do I not pronounce your name perfectly? Perfectly. The chair of our board and the illustrious leader of Ting. So give her a round of applause.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I am delighted to be here. It is just really lovely to see everybody's smiling faces and eat lunch somewhere other than at my desk in front of my computer. So thank you for sharing lunch with me today. Might come back up. So February 17th turns out to be quite a special day, as it's our own Becky Seek's birthday. And so I think we can sing to her. What do you think?
You guys got to all sing along, okay?
All right.
1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Stand up, Becky. Happy birthday, dear Becky. Happy birthday to you.
I know I speak on behalf of the board when I say Becky is amazing, and if anyone deserves to be celebrated at this lunch, it is certainly you. So happy birthday, Becky. Before we go too much further, I just want to do the traditional ask of, how is your cell phone? Is it going to ring? Only if it plays AC/DC will that be acceptable, I hear, because... so please just make sure your cell phones are taken care of. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. Thank you, Maddie, for a great lunch today. You're here for the annual budget discussion, and you're going to be hearing from Mr. Ted Zaleski himself, the Director of Management and Budget for Carroll County. Ted has been providing informative insights and entertainment into the Carroll County budget to our members for years, and we look forward to what he has to share. But of course, I've got some business in a very well-written script that I must attend to first. Thank you, of course, to the Community Media Center and Aaron for recording today's event. It will be streaming live on Comcast Channel 19 and HD 1086, as well as on YouTube and their website. So let's give the CMC a round of applause and thanks. We have 3 sponsors today that I'd like to introduce. If you'll please stand and be recognized as I call your name. First, Sherry Crasium-Boland, the principal at Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz, a Carroll County Chamber member for almost 70 years. Where are you, Sherry? She's at the birthday table where I think they're glued to their chairs back there. We have Dave Peliquin, president of Main Street Advisors, and a Carroll County Chamber member for almost 25 years.
Yeah, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. And last but certainly not least, we have Richard Turner, executive director of the Community Media Center of Carroll County. Thank you, Richard. I, of course, would like to recognize the elected and appointed officials who have joined us today. We have Diane Foster, Taneytown Councilwoman, present with us. Thank you, Diane. We have Chamber Board member and Carroll County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Stephen Lockard. Thank you. And we have members of the Carroll County Board of Education with us here today. We have Mr. Kenneth Kyler, President. We have Tyra Battaglia, Vice President. Marcia Herbert. Donna Savigny. And Pat Dorsey. Thank you. So it's really embarrassing to ask, but I'm going to ask, did I miss anyone? Is there anyone who we should be recognizing? Cool. Good job, Mr. McMullen, not making me look bad. I would like to recognize Dr. James Ball, president of Carroll Community College. He is also here with us today. And of course, we have some past chairs of the board in attendance. We have Dave Bollinger of Barnes Bollinger Insurance Services. We have Wayne Barnes of R. Wayne Barnes Life and Long-Term Health Insurance. We have Steve Wance of Carroll Community College. And we have Ben Yingling of Crawford Yingling Insurance. I was like, you're not Ben Yingling. Okay. And finally, if you are a member of the current board of directors for the chamber, please stand and be recognized. It's a great group of people that I get to work with. As mentioned earlier today, the sponsors are Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz, Main Street Advisors, LLC, and the Community Media Center of Carroll County. Our first sponsor's message will be delivered by Sherry Crasium-Bolin, principal with Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz, and the chamber's amazing treasurer. I've been told to hold it 6 inches away so that you don't scare the people at home.
Okay. Thanks, Val. Thanks, everybody, for coming out today. I just have a few words about the firm. About 10 months before we all went into our hiding places with COVID, Reger, Lehman, and Hauk, previously known as RLH CPAs, who grew up here in the Westminster community, merged with Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz out of Camp Hill. We went from 3 offices to 5, from about 35 team members to about 135 overnight. And we didn't know it at the time, but just 10 months later when COVID hit, we were very grateful to have that breadth of knowledge and expanded team to help our clients and others in the community take and get on board with PPP loans with the lenders, employee retention credits. So just a couple of notes about that. Employee retention credits, if you don't know what they are still available. I'd recommend doing it before you file your 2021 tax returns because it could cause amendments if you don't. So feel free to reach out to us or your CPA and ask about that. The other thing I left at your tables was a little map. For those of you that might not be aware, last year Maryland implemented pass-through entity tax, which was a SALT state and local tax deduction workaround for the $10,000 limit that we have at the federal level on our individual tax returns. So any pass-through entity, Maryland was trying to help out the small business owner that has a partnership or an S corporation by passing this legislation. They did so kind of before the IRS opined on that whole thing, along with about 6 other states at the time. The IRS did give their blessing in November of 2020, so that we spent all of last year trying to get on board as a state, and we finally had forms to file this in July of 2021 for 2020. So if you did not take advantage of that last year, something to consider this year, as that has been sticking around and nothing happened with our SALT limitation is still in existence. That'll be around for the next 4 years because even if they do nothing at all, that goes away in 2026. The map there does give you some indication that we now have 22 states in America that provide that type of a tax deduction for your business. Basically allows you to take the full tax deduction for your state and local taxes that you pay at the business level instead of at your individual level where it's capped. So it's very advantageous for a lot of people, so it's something to consider. It's not something for everybody. And the yellow states there on the map are those that have legislation that's in process at the moment. So soon to be half the states have something like that. So just something to keep an eye out. So that's my tidbit of tax information this year. So, Val?
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you for that nice little tax tidbits. Next, we have our second sponsor, who is Dave Peliquin, president of Main Street Advisors, LLC.
Yeah, Dave, thank you.
Good to see everybody again. It's nice to be out in public and meeting as we have for many, many years now. I wish I had a tidbit like what Sherry had because it's actually pretty useful information. The only thing I would, as all of us get older year by year, including myself, Main Street Advisors has been in Westminster since 1999. We're a fiduciary registered investment advisor, and we primarily manage assets for clients. We also provide financial planning services. And interestingly, some of our longtime clients, maybe when they started working with me when I was in my 40s, and I was there at one time, those folks are now in their 50s, 60s, and we've been managing their assets. We brought on a software program and also kind of beefed up the financial planning beyond spreadsheets. So for about 3 years now, we've been offering a range of fees to do either software-based or just consultative financial planning services. And it's, we tell people we've had 30-something couples come in and do a plan. We've had 40-something couples. But looking around the room, there's a few of you out there, but most of you are like me. And, in terms of retirement's closer than is college that you went to some years ago, if I can say it that way. So if you're, maybe, if there are any of you out there or family members or friends, we would urge you to give us a call. Melissa Jordan, sitting to my left when I was sitting there, and Ann Mondor, and myself would be glad to take a call just to talk about that. And we're always happy to point people in the right direction. It doesn't always have to be an engagement. There's many times we can just answer a couple questions. We're still on Main Street with now BSSF, and happy to sponsor this every year, and let's hope to see you again here next year. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our third and final sponsor, the guy in the room with the best socks, Richard Turner, Executive Director of the CMC.
Thanks, Val. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be out and see everybody in person. I'm tired of those little boxes, even though I think we'll still be using Zoom all the time. But it certainly is a pleasure to be able to be among all of you, have some fellowship. Mike, especially, steering the chamber through these times, really doing an outstanding job. So how about another round of applause for Mike McMullen, right? But it's absolutely a pleasure to be a sponsor, the media partner, to be able to get the kinds of good content that goes on in the chamber events out to our community. Because we know not everyone's going to make it here, and we want to make sure that the kinds of content that the chamber is involved with, making sure that businesses have been vital in our community, is heard. And we hear about the issues that confront us as a community, and that's our primary mission as an organization, as a nonprofit. I think it's a distinct pleasure, and I've referred to this particular event as being part of the rituals of spring, or the rites of spring, to be able to hear Ted Zaleski tell us about what's the outlook and the forecast for our upcoming budget season. I liken it because, as I walk out my door, I see the ground is starting to loosen up a little bit. It's not quite as hard and frozen. I see little daffodil bulbs are starting to sprout and come through the ground, and gives me hope that even though it's not quite warm out, or it's not bad out today, that those hard, cold, frozen times are going to warm and thaw, and that we'll have great opportunity before us. And then Ted gives us hope about what will happen with the budget and what we have to think about to come. But with that, I just want to say thanks for this opportunity. Look to CMC and our new sports programming. We were very fortunate to be able to hire Bob Blubaugh and Pat Stetzer, who are just long-term community residents, know a lot about sports and about the kinds of news and information that go on in our community. And as a result, you'll be seeing more programming, the kinds of highlights that we're doing with our local coverage of high school sports and of the community college sports, means that we see and can celebrate the kinds of it's competition, it's community, but it's us coming together. And so it's really a great, I hope you subscribe, watch local is my thing, because I know Mike tells you shop local, I'm going to tell you watch local. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Val. Oh yeah, and because we're streaming today, because we had some crazy fast internet here, it was our ability to actually stream today, so woo-woo!
Thank you, Richard. The kindness of our sponsors is what makes these events possible, and we could not do it without them. If anyone is interested in any of the sponsorship opportunities for the remainder of 2022, of course, you can see our fearless leader, Mr. McMullen, before leaving today. And now it's time. It's time to begin our program. I'm sure most of you know Ted Zaleski. As Carroll County's Director of Management and Budget, Ted has been with the county for 27 years, and as the Director of Management and Budget for 19 of them. He serves as the president of the Maryland Association of Counties Budget and Finance Affiliates since it began a decade or so ago. He is the past president of the Maryland Government Finance Officers Association. I swear these organizations try to make their titles as hard as you can to say. He served on the Government Finance Officers Association Budgeting and Fiscal Policy Committee. He served on the Towson University School of Business and Economics Advisory Committee. He is an adjunct instructor at McDaniel College, and he has helped develop a new public administration and policy graduate program at McDaniel College. Obviously, a very valuable member of our community. Ted lives in Carroll County, just outside of Westminster, and today, Ted's talk will be about the issues involved in the county's fiscal year budget 2022 and beyond. And then he'll take our questions. So please welcome me in joining Mr. Ted Zaleski.
A rite of spring, that's a nice thing to be.
Baseball lockout, but not a Ted Zaleski.
Okay, we heard from and thanked our sponsors. I want to thank them again. They've been doing this for me I kind of think it's for me, for a long time, for the chamber. So I hope it means they think I'm doing something right, that they want to continue to be associated with me. I was wondering what kind of crowd we would get today, and it's probably half of what we usually would get. So I'm sitting there eating and wondering what that means. I'm hoping it means people are still nervous about getting together in gatherings, and not that people have caught on that I'm just really not that interesting to listen to. In the crowd, I sometimes talk about some new people or things happening. Rob Burke is leaving Carroll County government for the Carroll County public school system. In my time here, I've seen a number of people leave Carroll County government for the school system. I don't believe I've ever seen anybody come from the school system to Carroll County government. Although John O'Neill and I are talking, though. Yeah. And Superintendent Steve Lockard will not be returning after his time here is up. And that got me thinking about, how long I've been here and how many people I've seen come and go. Superintendents, the next superintendent will be my 6th superintendent. Sometimes I think about some of these positions, and it's, how have I been here long enough to see that? And this is the 20th year for this event. I did my first one for the fiscal year 4 budget. And the Cal Ripken of listening to Ted Zaleski, Dave Bollinger, has been there for every one of them. Last year we did this virtually, and Dave seemed to be missing, but he got on and said, "Yep, I'm here." Kept the streak alive. It was kind of like when Cal Ripken had the bad sprained ankle, but got in the game anyway. So 20th year, I think I heard Mike say that he was going to get me a new car to celebrate. or maybe it was a beer. One of those.
It was a beer.
Okay, so it's been an interesting couple years since we were together in person. The last time we did this together was shortly before COVID took over our lives. And a lot has happened, a lot has changed. I mentioned last year we did this virtually. One of the things that I was worried about trying to do that is, trying to feel, am I connecting with the people who are sitting here listening to me or not? Some of you might remember I made up big emojis to say, okay, you should look like you're paying attention now, or you should look like you're laughing now. So COVID hit, and county office building pretty much emptied out, although I never stopped going into work, but I had a lot of the building to myself. Senior centers closed down, park recreation stuff stopped, a lot changed. We're mostly back together again now, but still lingering things out there as we try and deal with it. Now, early on, as we started finding our way through COVID, we were worried about revenue loss, significant revenue loss. We had no way to know what that might be, but we tried to figure out what kind of impact we could have. And at the time, what I told the commissioners is, on an approximately $400 million budget, I think we could be losing something like $4 million a month. So that would have been an impact. There would have been no way to just manage through. We would have had to do something, and do something means services people expected would have to change. There would be no way to just keep doing things. Fortunately, that didn't happen. And the only reason it didn't happen is because of the federal stimulus, or now stimuli. There's been through a number. Now, there are reasonable arguments to have about should the federal government have done what they did and the level that they did, and what's the impact going to be somewhere further down the road. But on a strictly local level, it did what it was supposed to do. And those fears of lost revenue were never realized. We weren't forced into a situation where we had to, on the fly, say, what are we going to stop doing? So we've been through a lot as we tried to manage those things. And that, saying we didn't have the really bad stuff that we were afraid of doesn't mean there weren't things to deal with. We've had a lot of changes to deal with, and a lot of how do you provide services, even if it's not a money problem. When you're not supposed to be near people, what do you do? How does that work? And I'm sure some of you have had dealings with the county where you've had to do things differently than you might have expected. We have a lot of people who are used to walking into the building every day, and we went for a long time where they weren't coming into the building at all. We had to find other ways of people leaving development information and permit information to keep things going. Our old tax collector, Rob Burke, had to deal with how do we get people's tax payments. So there was a lot to think through. Now, some of that has led to changes that aren't going to go away. Some of you might know, as kind of a hobby, I sometimes interview writers. And I did an interview which wasn't quite that. It was I interviewed a panel. Andrea Bursler from the library was part of it. Annette Danek from Random House was part of it. And Skip Fry from Random House. And Debbie Scheller, the owner of a Likely Story bookstore down in Sykesville, was there. And one of the questions I asked them, this was still in the middle of stuff, I said, what has changed for you? What are you doing now that you wouldn't have done if you hadn't been forced to do it, but now looks like a really good idea, and you're going to keep doing it anyway? And I thought that was a really interesting conversation. But I think we're facing the same thing. We're doing things different ways because we had to. But now that we're doing them, we said, well, this works pretty good. Maybe we ought to keep doing this. So I'm not going to say it was a good thing, that what we've been through, but some good things maybe emerged from it. So I told you we were afraid about what's going to happen to our revenues. The picture now is brighter, and in fact, probably the best looking picture we've had since back before the Great Recession. So we're talking about a dozen years. And those of you who have been to hear me repeatedly have heard me talk for some years now about how we never really recovered from the recession. We've just been kind of limping along, making our way. There hasn't been a good year. Right now is looking pretty good. We had the latest assessment of properties was down in South Carroll. This is our biggest assessment group. The county's divided into 3 groups. South Carroll is the most number of properties and also, generally speaking, higher level of values of the properties. And we got a 12.9% average assessment down there, larger than we planned for by a good bit. And again, easily the largest reassessment that's happened since back in the last reassessment, but yeah, the 2006, 7, 8, maybe back in that time frame. Now, there's 2 pieces of that for us. That was kind of the all properties, the 12.9%. On the residential side, we got 13.5%, and on commercial, 7.6%. Now, I was looking back at some of the other versions of this I've done, and I think 2 years, maybe 3 years ago, I mentioned that this same thing happened, that residential assessments were higher than commercial, and that we had never experienced that before. You know, however many years back I go, it was always the other way around. Commercial growth was higher than residential. And that first time I brought it up, I said, it must mean something. I don't know what it means, though. But now we've had 3 years where the same thing is continuing to happen. Now, some people's quick reaction to this is, okay, well, that's about what's happened to businesses in COVID. But this started before COVID, so I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact, but this is a longer trend than just what we've seen happen to COVID. So it's going to be interesting to see where this goes and if we can figure out what it means. Now, you hear 13% growth, and a lot of people immediately go to, oh, well, you guys are awash in money now, right? Well, not really, because it doesn't work. It's not quite that direct an impact. Remember, in Maryland, assessments are phased in over 3 years. So even if there's 13% growth, we're only seeing 1/3 of that every year. So right now, we're still planning on something in the vicinity of 3% growth a year. Property tax is our largest revenue, more than 60% of what we operate on. When you think about pressures on providing services and think about your biggest revenue growing about 3%, it's not hard to say, well, is that enough to do everything? And the answer is no, it's not enough, which means we're always trying to figure out, you know, what choices get made here, what is going to get done, what's not going to get done, what's going to grow, and what isn't going to grow. Income tax is our second largest revenue. And income tax, you've all heard me say before, is volatile, very hard to project, always a pain for us. The last few years have been even worse. Tax changes, anticipation of tax changes, people reacting or not reacting. It's been very difficult to try and understand what is actually happening to our revenue. I mean, we know what dollars are coming in, but what is underneath it all? What does it really mean for us? And even now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I've got it figured out, because I don't. It's hard to know what it all means to us. But it has become clear we have seen an increase in our income tax revenue, a noticeable increase. Now, in actual dollars, we for the last couple of years have been seeing more money coming in. But I was very cautious, and I kept telling the commissioners, we need to be careful here. Yeah, there's money coming in, but I'm not sure that this is money that's going to keep coming in. You know, I think some of this is just timing. But we've now got enough evidence in front of us to say, yes, there has been an increase. I'm still not confident saying exactly what that is, but when we go to the commissioners with our recommendations in about a month, we will be taking in an expectation that our income tax revenue is up by some millions of dollars from what we've been planning. So property tax came in bigger than was built into our plan. Income tax is going to come in better than was built into our plan. Recordation tax is another interesting story. When we were thinking about what's the impact of COVID going to be, one of the first things I thought about was recordation. Every time a property gets bought and sold, there's 1% that is coming to us to the county as a revenue source. And it's okay, who's going to be going out there looking for houses? We're going to get killed on this. Now, this is a much smaller revenue than property tax and income tax, but still big enough to matter to us. Not only didn't we get killed, but last year was one of the biggest years of recordation tax we've ever had. The same thing is happening this year. But on this one, I feel much more confident saying we can't build what we're seeing now into our long-term projections. This can't continue. Now, maybe I'm going to stand here and say it can't continue, and I'm going to be wrong again. But it seems like the housing market has to slow down at some point. If nothing else, everybody who wants a house at some point will have done something about it. So we're seeing 2 years of close to the highest recordation we've ever had, but we're not building anywhere near that into our projections for where we're going to be 3 years from now and 6 years from now. But the story there, two stories. One, these last 2 years have led to us sitting on more cash than we would normally expect to have. But that we do have to look at as one time. That's a result of what happened in this last year's budget or in this year's budget. You can't give salary increases, you can't add positions, you can't up service levels because those costs will continue and this money is not. But with the property tax and the income tax, we are seeing what would look like ongoing revenue change. There you can try to do more. But, and being called Rite of Spring is nice, but now I'm going to go back to Mr. Doom and Gloom for a minute. While the picture is better, we still have a significant problem. Those of you who have followed along with these things know that we not just adopt a budget, we also adopt an operating plan with the budget and 5 more years beyond that. We're looking to say, if we estimate out, project out the cost of continuing the services that we've committed to and compare that to what revenue we believe we're going to have, is there enough money to continue providing those services? We've been doing this operating plan since the late 90s, and the answer to that question was always yes. Sometimes it was a thinner margin than others, but the answer was always yes. We believe we will have enough revenue to support the commitments that we're making. And when I say the commitments, how much money is going to go to the school system? How much money is going to go to the library? How much money are we going to put into maintaining our road system? This is now going to be the 3rd year where the answer to that question is not yes. We are overcommitted. The costs of doing the things that we have said we're going to do have exceeded and still exceed how much revenue we believe we're going to have. Now, everything I just said made that picture better. The gap is not going to be as big as it looked a year ago, but it's still a gap. We're still upside down, and that's still a problem. Now, sometimes you get into these conversations, and the conversation can turn to, well, maybe we shouldn't look 6 years out. Maybe we should take a shorter time frame to think about. Or things are going to change. Why are we going to worry about that? And I'll be the first to say the operating plan is imperfect. There's too much we don't know to be able to say this is what's going to happen. But we work very hard to make reasonable assumptions and try and say, what do we think this picture is going to look like based on these assumptions and what we know today? So for me, an imperfect op plan is better than not doing this and just ignoring the future and hoping that everything's going to be okay. So right now, we're living with this unbalanced plan, with this idea that we're overcommitted. What I've been talking to the commissioners about is, okay, here's where we are. We're not going to suddenly fix this, but we've got to be working toward fixing this. How do we get back into a sustainable position? Now, along with all the other challenges that are there, we have a huge one that we're, I don't even want to say in the middle of, still in the early stages. We're moving from depending on volunteers for our fire and EMS to what we call a combined force, where we'll still have volunteers, but we will have a paid career county staff. We've been at this now for a couple of years. We have not gotten very far yet. We're not in the position yet to be sending county uniforms out on the street, but that's where we're heading. The big problem for me when I think about this in terms of what are we committed to and to this op plan is what is this going to cost? And we don't have an answer to that yet. You know, we've done what we could to try and say it might look something like this, but there's a lot to figure out. And to give you a sense of just how big a change this is, the commissioners have something less than 700 employees. So we're talking about people who actually report to the commissioners. So this isn't the school system, it's not the college, it's not the library. People who report to the commissioners. We don't know what the number is going to be yet, but we're thinking that we're going to be adding something like 200 employees. So less than 700 employees and a new 200 employees. This is huge change. And it's not just paychecks. There's so much else that goes along with it. Something I have to deal with, risk management is in my department. That's where we handle workers' compensation. We're adding more than a third to our employee base and inherently risky people. What is that going to do to workers' compensation? We don't have an answer to that question. We're going to have to get there eventually, but we don't know what that's going to mean now. So trying to look at the future and saying we don't know everything we want to know, here's a real big one where we don't know everything we want to know. And another problem, this is not new, it's been growing for a long time, and it's not just about Carroll County, this is about bigger things in the economy. And Mike mentioned this earlier, he said everybody's struggling with staffing. At the county, in these last couple years, we have found that we're attracting smaller and smaller applicant pools when we post jobs. So there's just fewer applications coming in. But in those applications, we're also finding that there are fewer and fewer who are actually qualified for the jobs they're applying for. Truly, there are times when you have 20 applications and 18 of them you can pretty much immediately toss away. It's just they have no qualifications for this job. They're not perfectly qualified. You need a road engineer and they're working at CVS. It's not going to get you there. So we have the number of jobs we have posted until filled, which used to be kind of we don't want to do this, but nothing else is happening. But now the number of jobs where we have posted until filled is growing and growing and growing. And in some ways that adds to the problems. You're already struggling to find people, then people look and, well, this job's been posted since 2019. I wonder what's wrong with the job. It just makes it even that much harder. And then on top of that, we have an aging workforce. In 2026, 45% of our employees will be at or within 5 years of retirement age. And that's scary, to me at least. I think, I don't know how many of those people will retire and when, but that's a lot of risk. That's a lot of people who can leave. And at the same time as we're struggling to fill jobs, are we going to be able to fill all those jobs? And I could talk about this, and some people might react in a kind of philosophical or conceptual way to it. But I think part of my message to you is this is going to be real impact to all of you. Government is about providing services. You need people to provide services. I mentioned the library. People want to be able to walk into an open library and find the book that they want on the shelf. What do you do when there's not enough people to open the doors? People want to drive on well-maintained roads. What do you do when there aren't enough people to get out there and do that work? And that one is very real. We struggle so badly in our roads department. Our norm now is 10, 15 jobs are open in roads all the time. We're never fully staffed. And there's no sign that that's changing, that it's a temporary thing. seems to be where we are. And where does this take us? It's really a scary question for me. Okay, talk about the governor's budget a little bit. Those of you who have been around for these before have heard some of the things I'll say before. You know, the governor's budget tends to be more of a sales brochure than it is a useful budget document. You know, so you dig in and try and see what you can get out of it. We depend a lot on the Department of Legislative Services for their analysis of what's in the governor's budget. They're the people who say, here's what's really in the budget or not in the budget. One thing that's interesting this year, often with the budget, there's a thing they call the BRFA, a piece of legislation, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. A BRFA exists because a governor puts out a budget that can only work if there are legislative changes made to match what he said in his budget. So that's an unknown when they do it. You know, so Governor, and I'm not picking on Governor Hogan. This is every governor, you know, in the time I've been around, at least, that we're always through this. You know, the governor's saying, here's a balanced budget, but it's a balanced budget if the General Assembly goes along with the ideas that he's proposed for legislation. Now, the state is in the best fiscal situation they've been in a very long time, which is good. You know, I've said to you before, when the state has a budget problem, I start to worry because we're always going to be part of the solution. Yeah, it's not a might be, it's we will be part of the solution. So we don't have the same kind of pressure on us this year that we have in some years saying, all right, how are they going to make this work? But there's still another question here when you look beyond this year. And I believe that some people at the state are probably thinking wrong about things and thinking everything is wonderful, we can make a lot of changes, and we're going to be okay. I'm saying, is this all really ongoing, long-lasting change in your fiscal situation? I don't think it is. Again, could be wrong. I'd be glad to be wrong. But I think it's more likely that this is going to lead to people wanting to do things that aren't going to be sustainable for the state. Now, the governor has proposed some significant income tax reductions. You know, he's talking about retirees and veterans, ideas that sound very appealing. And my point here is not to argue is this a good thing or a bad thing for those people, but just to talk about what is the fiscal impact. If he gets the legislation he wants for this, in the fiscal year 27, this will be a loss of almost $1 billion a year for the state. This is not nibbling around the edges. This is a significant change in money. If these tax changes go into place, that revenue is going to go away, and it's going to be hard to see it coming back. I mean, who's going to be the legislator who is going to propose, let's tax retirees more, let's tax our veterans more? You know, you'd have to be in a really tough situation to get people to start thinking that way. So then I'm back to, if the state has a budget problem, then we have a problem. So I already told you, I have some concerns about our future, and then I look at the state possibly taking $1 billion a year out of their revenue stream, and that just makes me that much more worried. Now, the governor has touted his budget as being structurally balanced. Same kind of ideas I'm talking about with my op plan. Although the state doesn't have something comparable to our plan, but they do carry the totals out 5 years instead of 6. But if you build in this tax decrease, in the last year that they'd be looking at, there'd actually be about $400 million in the hole. He can only claim structurally balanced if he looks at the numbers before the tax changes are made. Now, another fun thing about governors' budgets, it's always interesting what comparisons they make, what time spans they use to explain. And it's always choosing the way to present it that makes the point that they want to make, even if it's inconsistent with what was on the page before. Another thing that's on my mind, we had the Kerwin Commission looking at education funding and how we provide education. That turned into legislation. It's called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future or something along those lines. COVID kind of derailed the plans for Blueprint, and the General Assembly is still going to be struggling with what's the timing of this going to be, how is this going to look. Now, some of you might remember when this all came out, there was an idea that Carroll County was already funding in a way that would not require additional funding to implement Blueprint. Now, there are some counties that had to put lots more money in to do this. We weren't one of those, so that was good news. But is it going to stay that way? With some of the uncertainty, there's at least a question mark for me. And, in the superintendent's budget request, there's some dollars asked for that are attached to Blueprint-related things. But if we didn't need to have more funding for Blueprint, but we're being asked for more funding for Blueprint, what does that mean? So that's all still to be worked out. And there are some things that would appear to be required in legislation that the state is not including. Now, sometimes there are arguments between the legislative body and the executive body about exactly what legislation says, so maybe we'll have to watch how that plays out. Community colleges did fare well in the governor's budget this year. There's something called the Cade Formula, which was put in legislation years ago, I don't even remember anymore, but was supposed to tie community college funding to University of Maryland system funding. And what they said was supposed to happen has never happened. They keep redoing the legislation all the time to say, well, maybe next year. Well, this year it is funded in the governor's budget as the Cade Formula would suggest. So this is a significant change in funding for the community college. And from their point of view, I'm sure very welcome. They've been squeezed in recent years. The state has been doing little to add funding to community colleges. There's a great reluctance to continue increasing tuition, which means all the pressure for funding increases in the community college budget was coming to the commissioners. And of course, I'm telling you all the constraints and challenges we face. Yes, we can't simply fix that problem for them. Oh yeah, speaking of commissioners, none of them are here today, so I can talk freely. Oh, but this is being recorded. Think about Richard and the CMC recording this. I've said before, when I come to this event, it always feels a little bit like a reunion to me because there's so many people I know for so many different reasons, sometimes more than one reason. We've talked before about Dave Peliquin and I go back to when our daughters were in middle school together, and Dave Bollinger and I used to sit on the top seat of the bleachers in Winters Mill Gymnasium watching volleyball. So things come together in different ways, but I mentioned the CMC and the library. It's too early to say exactly what this means, but I'm actually working with a coworker and friend, Lori Hierstetter, on a podcast that's going to be about books and reading and related things in some collaboration with the library and with the CMC, who are both here with me today. Another good thing in the governor's budget, increased money for, they call it public safety, but basically it's revenue that we get, but it's intended to help us pay for law enforcement. And this is maybe close to a doubling, maybe $1 million to $2 million kind of thing. So not huge compared to some of the other numbers I'm talking about, but little help here is always good. And there's been a bill introduced to restore highway user revenue funding. So those of you who have been coming for a while might remember this was all the way back to Governor O'Malley during a state budget problem. There was a state shared tax, mostly gas taxes, that went to local jurisdictions to help us fund road maintenance. And we were getting about $12 million a year. That dropped to about $1 million. Nobody saw that coming. That was a huge impact to us because we didn't stop doing road maintenance. We just had to find the money somewhere else. So I can't point and say, there's the thing we stopped. But we had to find $11 million of something that didn't get funded. Okay. Mike's telling me to shut up.
No, I'm not. I did not say that.
So I'm skeptical. Even if they can restore the funding this year, again, on that long-term perspective, will they be able to continue doing it, or will this just be another tough budget year? Well, we took it away from them once. They've had it for a couple of years, but we can take it away again. Okay, I'll just mention two other things. I wrote a note here, so you have to see what it said. Oh, maybe three other things. One big thing we're dealing with now is in this past year, we purchased something like 500 acres around the northern landfill. What to do with solid waste is a big problem. We have a landfill, but it has limited life. We actually transfer more of our waste to Pennsylvania than we bury in our landfill. But there's a significant cost to that transferring. But if you put it in the landfill, it's cheaper, but when you run out of landfill space, then what do you do? So we're still in the early stages of figuring out what is this going to mean, how is this going to affect how we deal with solid waste. But we now have options that we didn't have available to us before. So this is going to be an interesting thing to follow in some of the years to come. We're not building schools the way we once did, but there are two important projects going on right now. One is a renovation and expansion of the Career and Tech Center. Those of you who go down Washington, probably seen things happening. They had this nice color green insulation on the wall facing the road there for a while. And then we're doing a replacement of East Middle School, a old school that's been a concern for a lot of years. So this will be a welcome change. And the last thing I'll mention, and if Commissioner Wance was here, he would probably stand up on the table and take a bow. This has been a big pet project of his. When I came to the county, we still had 90 miles of unpaved roads. We, over years, have taken care of some of that, but we still, until recently, had maybe 50 miles unpaved roads. The commissioners budgeted over 3 years, I think, the money necessary to do something with all these unpaved roads. We won't have anything left in a couple years. Now, this is not turning all these roads into Deer Park Road. Many of them are unpaved because they're in places where you just can't make a road the way a road ought to be. But we are doing things to give it a more lasting surface. You're no longer driving on just dirt or just stones. So this is going to be a pretty big deal for us. All right, so I will stop there, and we can take whatever questions anybody might have.
Talked about school population really experiencing a sharp decline in fiscal impacts of that. Has that turned around the last few years? Could you repeat that question?
Yep. She asked about decline in school population. I think you have to look at this in two ways. One, if we go back a number of years, Carroll County school enrollment had been growing and growing and growing with no apparent end in sight until all of a sudden it wasn't anymore and actually became declining. We had been planning capacity for about 29,000 students, and we now are in the 24,000, 25,000 area. So there was a big change from both expectations and actual loss of students. Then the other is enrollment loss due to COVID, which is not as big as that, but a more recent phenomenon. We saw population go down. This has led to some, fortunately, legislative action by the state to say, we're not going to penalize school systems on state funding because you've lost kids. Now, where that ends up, we'll have to see. But for the moment, at least, they've been trying to say, we're not going to hurt you for doing that. What the future will hold, I don't know. 15 years ago, I wouldn't have ever thought we could lose enrollment the way we did. Maybe things will change again. But I don't think there's any reason for us to expect right now that we're going to be heading back to the kind of numbers that we once had.
What are the time constraints on the spending of the COVID funds?
Multiple answers to that. The first round, we're already past those dates. But there's some money, we have 3 years, 4 years maybe before all the spending has to happen. I think there might be 4 pieces of this, and each one has its own set of rules. But in every case, we have people, it's funny how much time we put into this. People just had to find the time. The person who's the grants manager in my department has been kind of the point person on all this federal money. And she has another position that works with her that was vacant. And she came to me one day and said, Ted, I can do my job. I can do this second job with the federal money. But if I don't have that other position filled, I can't do 3 jobs. And okay, I understand that. So fortunately, we were able to fill that. And using some of the federal money, we've actually been able to get her a part-time position to help on some of the work we need to do tracking the federal money. Richard?
Yeah, in years past, you talked about our EMS, our emergency management services, and the volunteer departments and professional firefighters combined with police services. What's the status and how is that impacting revenues versus expense at this point in our outlook?
Well, the revenue impact will be relatively minor. The only way that helps us is when ambulances go out now from volunteer companies, there's ambulance billing in place, and they get that revenue. Once we're the ones going out, we'll get that revenue. But don't have any thought that that revenue is even remotely enough to pay for the services. We're still trying to figure out what is this all going to cost. But it is going to be millions of dollars more than what it costs today. The question is just how many millions of dollars. Okay, John?
Ted, you said that you had 700 county employees, you have to add 200 more. Have you had much of an attrition of county employees since COVID's been going on? Have you lost a lot of county employees?
Yes, and that's part of that big problem I'm talking about. We're losing people and struggling to replace them. Now, how many people left because of a COVID-related decision? I don't have any way to answer that, but I have to think it's at least part of it. And we're seeing this across the country. They talk about the big resignation or the big quit. People who are, for one reason or another, reevaluating their lives as they've gotten here and saying, nope, I'm making another choice. And we have our own local problems, but that's certainly part of the picture for us. Okay, Mike said that's all. Yeah, Mike is really hard on me.
Well, I've always told you, if you give us a little bit more good news, we'll let you talk a little longer, okay? Ted, I want to thank you. Ted is an extremely brave man, to give information like this, and to do it because it's the truth. He doesn't hold any punches. He's brave. He's brave enough to wear a Pittsburgh Steelers lanyard in Ravens country. I think another round of applause for this man here, okay? So I want to thank our sponsors. You guys have been here. This is my 12th one of these, and you guys have sponsored every time. And I'm talking about what used to be Rager, Lehman, and Houck, Brown, Schultz, Sheridan, and Fritz, and Main Street Advisors. Thank you, guys. Round of applause for them, please, please. Also for CMC, you guys are amazing with us. Thank you. And the staff of the Best Western, you guys always do a great job. I also want to thank Val. She did a good job, right? First one of these meetings. She's amazing. And I also wanted to say once again thank you to Becky Seek, who's been doing a lot of the work behind the scenes, and for your birthday, happy birthday. Once again, happy birthday, Becky. We're accepting applications right now for the Carroll Biz Challenge for year 2022. We've got these little cards out there. If you know somebody that's got a business that is either just started it or looking to, you need to get them to apply. It's free. Our application period goes to the end of May. If you don't know what this is, talk to me, but the person can win $5,000 in cash and a lot of other stuff. It's a great, great event that we do. We're also taking applications for our Leadership Carroll class of 2023. So if you want somebody on there, every year I say the same thing, and every year people wait till the last minute and they put the application in and there's a waiting list and they don't get in until the next year. So if you want to get in, plenty of room right now. Go to our website, fill out the application. We've got a calendar of events kind of on our website, but there's some of the events are on the table there. We've got lunches coming up. And one of the coolest things that we like to do is we like to have fun and we take trips. Some of you have been on our trips. We've got a trip to Greece in October of this year that will be absolutely outstanding. I went on this trip in October of 2019. We took 55 folks with us. This is a great trip. If you're interested, please, we've got some flyers on the back. And I think that's it. And hey, it's 1:30. We're finishing on time. So thank you again to our friends from CMC and this will be on your website, right? So if you want to watch it again, and Ted will be here, you can come up here and ask him some actual questions. I didn't mean to cut him off, so thank you so much for being here, okay?